Hi there, I'm John Lebensold for Zendcast.com, and today what I'm going to be doing is introducing Zend controller action helpers. Now, action helpers are a really neat way of introducing controller logic into your application without having to extend a base class, which is often one of the approaches that people take. So in this tutorial, what we're going to do is we're going to create some kind of common functionality. In this case, it's going to be a simple extension to our view script that we would want to perhaps use on multiple controllers and multiple modules. So instead of having all of our controllers inherit from a base class, we're going to be creating a Zend controller action helper. So I'm just going to walk through that right now. The first thing I want to do is I want to use my own namespace. Now, with a bit of configuration, you can actually have the action helper sitting in your views helpers folder, but for simplicity, at least for this tutorial, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make mention of my ZC namespace. So in the library ZC folder, I'm going to create a folder for the action helper. So in here, I'm just going to create a folder called ZC, and then a folder called, I believe I'm going to call this action, because we are dealing with action helpers, and I'm going to create a folder called helper. And in the next video, what we're going to do is we're actually going to look at how we can take this, extend this, and provide unit testing. So we're going to be using our controller to essentially unit test this action. But for this tutorial, just because this is the first one I'm doing on Zend controller actions, or action helpers, I'll just call them action helpers. I just want to show you how you can implement them yourself. So I've now got ZC action helper. It is a folder structure in my application. And I'm going to start by creating a new class, and I'm going to call this class signup. And you'll notice, you should be, for the regular viewers, you'll see that I've actually put in a software license here. This is the Boost software license, which for Zendcasts I don't really need. And so we have a signup class. This is actually going to be ZC underscore action underscore helper underscore signup. And it will extend from Zend controller action helper abstract. Now, if you're at all familiar with Zend view helpers, you'll see this and you'll say, oh, okay, we're doing something similar, where we have the abstract class as a base class, and when we inherit from the abstract class, or when we extend from the abstract class, we're able to easily plug into the rest of the Zend framework. So we haven't actually registered this plugin or anything. We haven't made it accessible to our view. But if you look at the abstract class, you can see that it has methods like get action controller, get front controller, pre-dispatch, post-dispatch, get response, get name. And oftentimes, what you'll end up doing, or what sometimes people do with Zend framework projects, is they'll actually create a base controller, which can be okay, does work if you have functionality that's common for everything. But if you want to incorporate your own functionality across multiple controllers, another way of doing that, aside from also you can do a Zend controller plugin, but another way of doing it is to also use action helpers. And so action helpers also provide you access to those methods like pre-dispatch. For example, if I do pre-dispatch here, and oops, I have to actually mention that this is a function, then I can do some funky things. So I'm, just for the sake of this example, I'm going to say I am sign up pre-dispatch. Just going to echo that. Now going back to my application here, oops, I didn't clear out my view before starting this tutorial. Okay. And I didn't clear out my controller from the last one. Okay, so when I refresh this ZC page, you don't actually see anything. However, if I wanted to register this sign up action helper, all I would have to do is modify my Bootstrap in order to incorporate that into my application. So in my Bootstrap, I'm going to create a protected function called init action helpers. And I'm going to access the Zend controller action helper broker. So this is a management class. It essentially takes care of and has a collection of action helpers that are accessible to your application. And I'm going to add a helper. Now you'll notice that the type hint here says that I need to have something that is of type Zend controller action helper abstract. So because we've inherited from the abstract class, our new class is going to actually fit very nicely in here. So now I can create a new ZC underscore action helper signup. So now this is going to be initialized as part of our application's Bootstrap. I refresh this again, and it says helper signup not found. Okay. ZC action helper signup, and it says it's not found, which means that the namespace, no, the namespace looks good. Let's see what's going on here. Autoloader, oh, not namespaces, namespaces. I knew that looked funny. Okay. Refresh this again, and you see IAM signup pre-dispatch. So this action helper is now firing. Obviously, you wouldn't want to echo something in your pre-dispatch because that messes up your view. But you can see that this pre-dispatch method is actually getting fired, or is actually running, once we register that particular action helper. Now this is really neat because with a little bit of code, we can actually start adding variables to our view. I'll explain what I mean in just a second. So typically, let's say that we have our index controller and we were doing something where somebody logs in. So we could do something like if this get request get param logged in. So we're grabbing a parameter called logged in, and the default will be false. So if it doesn't exist, then this view sign up equals you are logged in, and else this view sign up equals sign up to our site. So on one hand, this is fine because what you're doing is you're basically telling the view how you want to behave. But if, for example, we had a little brick or a box on our site that would either show a login form or it would show who you're logged in as, or if you had a search box and you wanted the search box to always be there, if you put that functionality in the base controller, then if you end up with a page that doesn't have that, let's say it's an FAQ page or an about page, then you're going to have essentially code that is in a base controller or in your application that is not necessarily associated with that controller, and yet it's still in that controller. So that would be one alternative. Another alternative would, of course, to take some code like this and copy and paste it everywhere, which is, of course, a really bad idea. And another way of doing it is to actually use the action helper to create a variable in your view that you can then reference on the pages that you want to reference it on. So if I wanted this to actually appear right now, I would just echo this sign up. And it would say sign up to our site, which is great. And then if I add the parameter logged in equals 1, then it says you are logged in. Obviously, we don't have a login form here. Now, if I wanted to put this functionality somewhere else, on an about page, on an about controller, on another in a completely different module, then this is not going to work very well because it's not easily encapsulated and repurposed. So to get around that, let's go back to our action helper. Now in the action helper, I'm going to start by creating a method called getView. And the reason I want to get the view is I want to get the view of the controller in question. So this action helper can run at any point with any one of the controllers in our application as long as it's registered in the Bootstrap. So I'm going to have an instance or a reference to an instance of the view variable. So I'm going to create a protected view variable, and then I'm going to say if null is not equal to this view, in other words, if the view variable is currently not set, then return this view. Else, I want to get this get action controller. So it doesn't matter which controller. And then I want to say this view equals controller view. And then I want to return this view. So here we're just creating a reference to it, and we're getting the view as it is, or as it exists in the action controller. So this could be the index.phtml view. If we were in the error controller, then it could be in the error.phtml view, any view in your Zend Framework application. I also have to shout out to Matthew Weir-O'Finney because he has a wonderful blog post about this, which I will make reference to either in the comments or in the description. So the first thing we do here is we grab the view. So I'll say view equals this get view. Then I can go back to my index controller, and I can literally just take this code here, cut it, and paste it in here. And instead of saying this get request, get param, logged in, all that's going to work, because if you look here, I have access to the request. I also have access to the response object. And instead of saying this view, although I could say this view, I'm just going to say view signup and view signup. So now I'm using a reference of the view object that I'm getting from the controller, and I'm setting the view variable in pre-dispatch. So now the same thing happens where I get the signup variable initialized, except the index controller remains totally clear. So if, for example, I want to create a new controller over here, call it the about controller, and I extend Zend controller, action and let's say I've got the about action, so it's about. I know that's kind of weird. And I create a folder called about, and I create a PHTML file called about.phtml. Then I could do the same thing here. I could say this signup. And if I go to zc/about/about, then it'll say sign up to our site. So we're able to take this code and essentially use it anywhere we want. In the next video, I'm going to show you how you can get 100% code coverage on not only your controllers. We're going to look at using the controller test case class, which we looked at a couple months ago. But I'm also going to show you how you can take this action helper, which is kind of sitting in between the controller and the view, and how we can get 100% code coverage of some component like this. I'm John Lebensold, and thanks for listening.